Wonder of the Wasteland, Chapter 10, Part 1. Some moments elapsed before the stunning effects of this loss had worn off enough to permit Adam's mind to connect the cause of it with the disappearance of Jenny. After careful scrutiny of tracks near where the pack had lain, Adam became convinced that Jenny was to blame for his destitution. His proofs culminated in a handful of unburnt matches that manifestly had been flung and scattered away from the pack. The tricky burro, taking advantage of Adam's absence, had pulled the canvas off the pack, and in tearing around in the boxes for morsels to eat, she'd bitten into the box of matches and set them on fire. I didn't think, cried Adam, remembering the advice of Dismukes. Overcome by the shock, he sank upon the ground and fell prey to gloomy and hopeless forebodings. "I'll lay down and die," he muttered. But he couldn't so much as lie down. He seemed possessed by a devil who would not permit the idea of surrender or death. And this spirit likewise seemed to take him by the hair of his head and lift him up to scatter the tears from his eyes. "Why can't I cuss the luck like a man? Then look around to see what's got to be done." Jenny had made good her escape. When Adam gave up hope of finding the burro, the hour was near sunset, and it was high time that he should decide what to do. "Go on to Indian camp," he declared tersely. He decided to start at once and walk in the cool of the night, keeping close to the mountain wall so as not to lose his way. His spirits rallied. Going back to the camp scene, he carefully gathered up all the unburnt matches and placed them with others he carried in his pocket. He found his bag of salt only partly consumed, and he made haste to secure it. His canteen lay beside the spring. The ruddy sunset and the stealing down of twilight and the encroaching blackness of night had no charms for Adam now. His weariness increased as the hours prolonged themselves. Short, frequent rests were more advisable than long ones. The canopy of stars seemed in procession westward, and many a bright one he watched sink behind the black slope of mountain toward which he was bound. There were times when his eyes closed involuntarily and all his body succumbed to sleep as he toiled on. These drowsy spells always came to a painful end, for he would walk into a thorny mesquite. Adam saw a weird, misshapen moon rise late over a dark range to blanch the desert with one light. He walked all night, and when dawn showed him landmarks now grown familiar, he had a moment of exhilaration. The long, low-reaching ridge of mountain loomed right before him. When he rounded the sharp, blunt corner, his eyes were greeted by a sight of deep-mouthed canyon yawning out of the range, and full of palms and other green trees. He saw a white stream bed and the shine of water, and what he took to be the roofs of palm-thatched huts. "I've got there. This is the Indian Canyon, where Dismukes told me to stay," said Adam, with pride in his achievement. At first sight of what he took to be habitations cheered him. Again, that gloomy companion of his mind was put to rout. It looked worth striving and suffering for, this haven. The barrenness of the desert all around made this green canyon mouth an oasis. It appeared well hidden, too. Few travelers passing along the valley would have suspected its presence. The long, low ridge had to be rounded before the canyon could be detected. With steps that no longer dragged, Adam began his descent of the canyon slope. It was a long, gradual incline, rough toward the bottom, and the bottom was a good deal farther down than it had appeared. At length he reached the wide bed of the white boulders strewn about in profusion where some flood had rolled them. In the center of this bed trickled a tiny stream of water, slightly alkaline, Adam decided, judging from the white stain on the margin of sand. Following the stream bed, he made his way up into the zone of green growths, a most welcome change from the open glare of the desert. He plodded on perhaps a mile without reaching the yellow thatch of palms. "Will I never get there?" panted Adam, almost spent. Finally, Adam reached a well-defined trail leading up out of the stream bed. He followed it to a level flat covered with willows and cottonwoods, all full-foliaged and luxuriantly green, and among which stately palms swaddled in huge straw sheaths of their own making. The dust in the trail showed no imprints of feet, and Adam regarded that as strange. Still, he might be far from the camp or village that had looked so close from the slope above. Suddenly he emerged from the green covert into an open glade that contained palm-thatched huts, and he uttered a little cry of joy, but it took only a second glance to convince him that the huts were deserted. Hastily he roamed from one hut to another. He found, oh yes, great clay water jars and pieces of broken pottery and beds of palm leaves through which the lizards rustled, but no Indians, nor any sign of recent habitation. "Gone, gone," he whispered hoarsely. "Now I'll starve." His accents of despair contained a note of hardness, of indifference, born of his extreme fatigue. His eyes refused to stay open, and sleep glued them shut. When he opened them again, it was to the light of another day. Stiff and lame, with a gnawing at the pit of his stomach and an oppressed mind, Adam found himself in sad plight. Limping down to the stream, he bathed his face and quenched his thirst. And then, removing his boots, he saw that his feet were badly blistered. He decided to go barefoot to save his boots as well as to give the raw places a chance to heal. Then, without any more reflection, he wrought himself into a supreme effort of will, and it was so passionate and strong that he believed it would hold as long as intelligence governed his actions. "My one chance is to live here until the Indians come back," he decided. "There's water here and green growths. It's an oasis where animals, birds, living creatures come to drink. I must eat." His first move was to make slow and careful examination of the trails. One which led toward the mountain bore faint traces of footprints that a recent rain had mostly obliterated. He lost this trail on the smooth rock slope. The others petered out in the stones and sage. Then he searched along the sandbars of the stream for tracks of living creatures, and he found many, from cat tracks to the delicate ones of tiny birds. After all, then, the desert was an abode for living things. The fact stimulated Adam, and he returned to the glade to exercise every facility he possessed in the invention of instruments or traps or snares. He had a knife and a pair of long leather boot strings. With these and a bundle of arrowweed sticks and a tough elastic bow of ironwood and strips of bark and sharp bits of flinty rock, Adam set to work under the strong, inventive, guiding spirit of necessity. As a boy, he had been an adept at constructing figure 4 traps. How marvelous the accuracy of memory. He had been the one to build traps for his brother Gerd, who had not patience or skill, but who loved to set traps in the briar patches for redbirds. Adam's nimble fingers slacked a little as his mind surveyed that best part of his life. To what extremity a man could be reduced. The dexterity of his idle youth to serve him thus in his terrible hour of need. He remembered then his skill at making slings, and following this came the inspired thought of the possibility of constructing one. He had a strong rubber band doubled around his pocketbook. Sight of it thrilled him. He immediately left off experimenting with the bow and went to making a sling. His difficulty was to find cords to make connections between the rubbers and a forked prong, and also between the rubbers and a carrier of some sort. For the latter, he cut a triangular piece out of the top of his boot. Always in the old days, he had utilized leather from cast-off shoes and had even made a collection of old footgear for this purpose. But where to get the cords? Bark would not be pliable and strong enough. Somewhere from the clothes he wore he must extract cords. The problem proved easy. His suspenders were almost new, and they were made of linen threads woven together. When he began to ravel them, he made the discovery that there was enough rubber in them to serve for a second sling. When the instrument was finished, he surveyed it with satisfaction. He had no doubt that the deadly accuracy he had once been master of with this boyish engine of destruction would readily return to him. Then he went back to work on the other contrivances he had planned. A failing of the daylight amazed him. For an instant he imagined a cloud had crossed the sun, but the sun had set and darkness was at hand. If days fly like this, when life will soon be over, he soliloquized with a sigh. End of Chapter 10, Part 1.